Every entrepreneur has a story. Welcome to Happy Half Hour with an Entrepreneur, where each episode your host, Brian Carney, will share a drink with a successful business owner and have them discuss their unique journey, gaining insight on what it takes to be an entrepreneur and the different ways to get there. Brian isn't just a beer nerd, he's also the co-founder of River's Edge Advisors, a financial planning firm headquartered in Delaware, specializing in working with business owners. It's time to pour yourself a drink and enjoy a happy half hour with an entrepreneur.
Hey everyone, welcome to Happy Half Hour with an Entrepreneur. I am your host, Brian Carney. My guest today is Robert Wittig. Robert is the owner and founder of a commercial real estate firm called Diamond State Management. His story is actually pretty amazing. He's a former addict that's been sober for nearly 3 decades. And he and his partners have developed or acquired over 1.7 million square feet of commercial space over his career. Robert, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah.
3 decades is telling. I hear that and I'm like, how's that possible?
Absolutely.
Well, you have to be old to be sober for 30 years.
Exactly. Well, we're definitely going to get into that. And, obviously we on the show, we typically drink a beer, but I'm going to actually sample. I'm also a seltzer-aholic. So I love these seltzers. So I'm going to drink a polar seltzer and give it a rating by the end. But I do appreciate you jumping on and being willing to talk to us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to do it. Love this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, so let's start out with the easy one. Tell us a little bit about your company and what you guys do.
Well, so DSM was really originally a company called Diamond State Realty, started by my father back in 1969. So, we've been around a while now. My family's been in real estate in this area for significantly long time, 50 plus years. DSM, Diamond State Management I started that company, I'm going to tell you 30 years ago, 31, 32 years ago to branch into property management and to property development and ownership. And it started out kind of as a one-man band. My brother Fred and I were doing things together. I did most of the work. We were developing small strip centers and small office buildings and single tenant net lease deals. And it's grown to, 40 people and
Crazy. Happens fast, right?
Yeah. Well, you would think, and a lot of people look at you and say it happened fast. How did that happen all of a sudden? I think one of the commonalities you'll find between anybody you talk to is that it's not overnight and it's not without a lot of work. It's not without a lot of 20-hour days and 7 days a week. And everybody looks around and all of a sudden says, it must be easy. That guy did it so quickly, but no, it wasn't quick. We've been at this a long time.
I love that saying. I know it's something like you're a 20-year overnight success. I always love that analogy. It's definitely true.
That's probably about right for us. It probably took 10, 15 years before we really started to catch our stride.
Yeah, that's great. Well, talk a little bit about how the company's broken into the different divisions, and I'm interested in which one you enjoy spending the most time in.
Well, that's a great question. I will tell you that I probably enjoy the development side the most, even though it's difficult. My brother Fred and I and my partner Dave Cantera, we often say development's like sweeping water uphill. You can do it, but you got to be really fast, right? Really efficient. And in any environment, whether it's Newcastle County, Sussex County, Kent County, outside of this state, there's areas that are easier and areas that are tougher, but you face challenges everywhere you go.
Yeah.
And we get pretty parochial about the challenges. Like we take them on head on and take them personally, but it's part of the fun. It's part of the reward. So I would say I like the development piece. I love the fact that our construction company is really in a growth mode. That's great. I knew nothing about construction when I started. I used to have to go home and people would say things on my jobs to me about buildings that I was literally building to own, and I wouldn't know what they were talking about. I'd go home and I'd look at this is before the computer and phones. I'd go home and I'd look at this little dictionary I had.
Yeah.
And I'd look up what they said. So
like a translator dictionary.
I had no idea. So I learned, it was baptism by fire. But we got a really good, smart construction team now.
Yeah.
Makes my life a lot easier.
No
and their growth is really exciting. And of course, I'd say the growth on the brokerage side. So, I skipped over, but we're development, we're management, we're brokerage, and we're construction. And I would say the other thing is I love watching the youngsters, right? We got a lot of young kids in there, and watching them grow, and hopefully mentoring them correctly. I didn't have the luxury of that. Everything I did, just by nature of the way I started, I was alone. I kind of
Yeah.
had to figure it out. I love watching these kids bounce stuff off each other. We have a real organic process. We have a very open and transparent process here. Much different than a lot of brokerages. We meet constantly and talk about our deals. We're very open about what's going on in the marketplace, who we're working with, what kind of transactions they're working on. We ask each other questions, and they're learning quickly. So that probably, of all the things I discussed, is the most rewarding. The one that I find the most interesting is probably development.
That's it. So that's fascinating. I want to talk a little bit about the mentoring because I find that interesting. And it doesn't seem like you set out to create a second generation for DSM, but just by hiring good young talent and them being engaged and wanting to learn from you, that's the result of what happened. Is that a fair way to say it?
Yeah, it is. And listen, the growth also requires some inherent legacy um, uh, oversight, right? So I'm very fortunate. My daughter's here, but neither one of my children, they didn't have to come into the business. Like
Sure.
I didn't assume they would, and if one does or doesn't, that's great. My son may someday. He's going to pursue some other things, which is, I think, fantastic. That he has other interests, and so he'll pursue those. But as we grew, right, and we owned more, and we managed more, and we leased more, we need more people, and we want some people who are going to be around. So it's great to have these young people who are engaged and invested, because our hope is that some, if not all, or many of them, stick around and sit in our chair someday.
Yes.
Because you can't. Our portfolio is not necessarily such that we can just offload it in a day. We don't have this capacity to get rid of our inventory like many companies in one fell swoop. So even if we were to unwind and stop developing today, there'd be years of work left.
Sure. Yeah. So having an intergenerational inside succession plan sounds pretty amazing.
Yes, and it didn't start out that way, but it's nice. So it's beyond just my daughter. It's my daughter and her contemporaries, and it's going to take all of them, especially if they want to grow, and all of them want to be successful, because that's additional layers of success, responsibility, obligation, and frankly, hopefully, ownership and assets.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
Well, you guys have been really successful working with what many people in the real estate would call, large anchor tenants, having tons of success with like a Wawa or a Wisfis or a CVS or Walgreens. How are you able to build those relationships and get them excited about the opportunities that you have?
Well, so kind of as a correction, they're really considered more of a mini anchor, right?
Okay.
But we love them. Don't get me wrong. We love them. We love the velocity associated with those type of tenants when they're doing a lot of deals, that they're very aggressive, that they're great credit, very credit worthy tenants.
Sure.
How did it start? My father did a bunch of 7-Eleven deals years ago.
Yeah.
And he did a bunch of Wendy's deals years ago, and he did a bunch of McDonald's deals years ago. And he introduced us to the crew at Wawa. We did 1 or 2 deals with them, and that relationship's been going on since 1987, maybe 86. And we just did a renovation on a center that we have in Middletown that we put them in 1988.
Wow.
And we still own it, and they're still our tenant. 30 some years later, they're
That's
still
crazy.
rent, almost 40 years, 35 years. So we build on that relationship. And I think the way we build on it is to provide them service.
Yeah.
Right? Provide them service and value. And if we keep doing that, and we're competitive in the marketplace, find them in the sites first, put them first, whether it's them or any of our other clients, that's what we do. When Alan Levin and I did Happy Harry's for years, I went out and focused on his growth model, and we found locations and put him in locations economically that were successful and met his needs. And as long as I continue to fulfill that need for him and do it in a way that he was comfortable with, we just continue continue to do it. And we still own probably 15 drugstores out of all the ones we did for them years ago.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is an odd question, but do you still call Walgreens Happy Harry's like I do, or is that
All
just,
the time. All
yeah,
the time.
it's hilarious. It hasn't been Happy Harry's in years and you still call it that.
I look at the old leases and they still say Happy Harry.
Yeah. And it's funny to have the Wawa back in 1988. You know, that's back in the day where you used to have to order the sandwich from the woman who was standing behind the counter as opposed to having the fancy touchscreen, the kiosk.
Oh, there was no gas. Remember, there was no gas. They
no
did the
gas,
first Delaware store in Millsboro with gas. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, one of the things in looking at a lot of the research that I was doing about you guys, one of the things that you guys have been credited for doing is taking sort of like old, dormant, stale, vacant properties and turning them into really viable commercial real estate projects. How are you able to identify a piece of property that you think can become something?
Well, you know, I would say really having a strong knowledge of what our tenants need
Yeah.
and tenants in general need, you know, what the QSR market needs. That's, you know, your quick sit down restaurants, quick serve restaurants.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just have a good insight into what these people need. I mean, we're really invested in how these real retailers operate. And so we go out and we try and find good real estate on good corners that will serve us for years to come. And in the meantime, if it's really good real estate, we're going to be able to pair it with really good tenants.
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes it's the tenant comes first and the deal, the piece of real estate, the deal comes second. And sometimes we just find real estate that we really like.
Yeah.
And then we pair it with good tenants. And I would say that's probably a 50-50 paradigm. But, you know, it doesn't happen without years of knowing the agents in Dover, the agents in Sussex, the
Sure.
property in Kent, the properties in Millsboro, you know, and understanding who's there, who's not there, why they would want to be there. So we've just been fortunate because my brother and I live it, you know, for years we worked 7 days a week.
Sure. Just like any other business, this is still a relationship business. So you build those relationships over time. It's one of the things that you know, that's pretty obvious that's coming out there.
Yeah. And success begets success, right?
Yes.
As long as you can continue to, I'm sure it's the same with your business. As long as you're giving your clients great returns, they're going to refer you and they're not going to leave you and they're going to continue to plow forward with you.
Yeah.
So as long as we continue to give our clients real value, find the locations they want and they're successful, why do they want to reinvent the wheel? Let
Great
us
point.
go out and work. So
Simple and straightforward is always a good solution as far as I'm
yeah.
concerned. Yeah. So talk a little bit about how you got your start in the business. Now you said your dad had a real estate company. Did you go in and work with him?
Yes. Yeah. So three of my four brothers did. My oldest brother, Ed, went to college and went right to work as an engineer for DuPont and then ended up with DuPont Merck, and he retired with them. And he's actually involved with us as a principal. But as is all the boys. But then David went to work for him, my directly older brother, my brother Fred. My brother David moved to Florida. He went into real estate down there. He's up here now as a superintendent working with us. And my brother Fred went to work for MBA when the real estate market crashed in the late 90s. It crashed, and he was smart. He jumped off and got a good job with MBA. Learned a lot about, you know, structure, work ethic, and created some great relationships. And he brought that back, and he's been back for 15 years now. So, but it started with our pop, really, in the back of a car driving down the highways looking at real estate. Just what we do today.
That's crazy. So it's interesting that your brother went to a corporate, and obviously MBA has an incredible reputation for, you know, everything that they taught people and the culture that they built. And for him to be able to pop out for 15 years and then, or for however long he was gone, and then pop back into the world that's pretty fascinating. Yeah.
And I would say it was almost 20 years. I think his heart was always in real estate.
Yeah.
Always was. And it was difficult times back then. And so he made really what I think at the time was a good decision to get out and see how other things happened, how other things worked. I foolishly plodded along. It worked out real well, so that when he came back, we had assets, we had, you know, income, you know, we had passive income, we had people in place, so that when he brought his energy, intellectual capital Uh, we just, and another friend of ours who we went to college with, he's always been with us, aside from another business he had at the time, John Papilli. But, the three of us just kind of went back to work, and in real estate, as the market got back, we've seen 4 now cycles.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So when the first cycle came, I probably almost wanted to take the pipe, right? The second cycle came, I maybe just wanted to get out of the industry. The third cycle came, I really just saw it as an opportunity, frankly,
Sure. Yeah.
right? To double down, to make acquisitions. And now that the fourth one's here, we're going to work our way through it, or the fourth one may be upon us. We're going to work our way through it. We're going to take advantage of opportunities. We're really well positioned for this to hope. If this affects some of our clients that we have that would be material, then we've got bigger problems. So we really like, our tenant base. We really like our asset base. We like the real estate we're involved in.
That's great.
Yeah.
Do you have, it's probably similar in our industry when these market cycles happen, people always say, well, this time it's different than it was before. This is a different downturn in the real estate market, or this is a different downturn in the stock market. And I always feel, and I don't know if you guys feel similarly, it has a different reason, but things always are cyclical and come back. Is that the same way in your space?
I would agree. I think this is very different than the last 2 really significant downturns we've seen. I think that the ingredients are different. I think that it's going to manifest itself differently, but it's exactly that. It's a down cycle, and you just have to insulate yourself the best you can for it.
Mm-hmm.
Prepare. I tell all these, we're still extremely busy, and a lot of deals are taking place. I'm telling them, listen, make hay while the sun shines, but be prepared for a rainy day.
Yeah, great point.
It's not going to always be this way.
Yeah.
Right. You don't want all of a sudden one day you'll wake up and it could be quiet. The phones could stop ringing. You better be prepared to wait it out.
Great. It's a great point. It really is. Well, let's talk about, you've been pretty open in your life about your struggles with addiction. So, and I would consider you a key advocate for other people that are struggling, and someone that is willing to help anyone that's going through those issues. So talk a little bit about, 30 years ago with your struggles with addiction.
Well, it's interesting. I really feel in retrospect, my addiction started from the day I drank, right? So by the time I got to the point where I really felt I had a problem, I felt my problem was just drugs, right?
Yeah.
To be very candid. And I thought if I went away for a little while, I could deal with this issue with drugs and some of the inconsistencies in my life that I created. And I really didn't understand the depth of the problem.
Yeah.
And I certainly didn't understand addiction, the disease of addiction.
Sure.
So I went away to rehab, kind of to check out and catch my breath and see if I couldn't get out from underneath a lot of hot water.
Yeah.
But it was unfortunately pretty eye-opening, right? Like, shit, it's more than just drugs. I'm an addict, alcohol and drugs. And you have to stop drinking. And that didn't happen overnight, right? So I went home after that, and I relapsed several times before I finally stopped. But it planted the seed. And I got hooked up with a bunch of like really great guys in AA, and they were pretty open about recovery. And at the time, 32 years ago, it was still a bit verboten. It was still a bit
taboo
a bit taboo. That's a great word, a bit taboo. It wasn't openly spoken about. It wasn't, one of the things that they say in AA meetings a lot, or you hear around recovery a lot, is that, everybody comes in worried about who they're going to see in an AA meeting, but they never realize that person's there too.
Right. Yeah.
So if they're there, they're there for the same reason as you. They're not there to judge you. They're certainly not there because they came in on the wings of roses,
right,
and, having conquered the world. They're there for some similar reason to you. It could be as simple as they just drank too much, or their whole world had fucking fallen out. I had stinking fallen out from underneath.
No worries.
But so I was enlightened, and I'm like, yeah, man, I definitely have that gene.
Yeah.
And it became ever more apparent to me. So when I finally did put the put the bottle down. I listened to these guys,
Yeah.
and they were very open about it. And it was really at a great time in AA because I, I didn't care what people thought or said.
Yeah.
And while I'm not, while I'm active, I'm not as active in recovery as some. I'm more active than others. I may not be as deep into the big book, which is, kind of the footprint for recovery, the steps of AA.
Yeah.
I'm not as conversant as others, even after 30 years. But what I can do is take you to a meeting,
Right.
meet good guys. They kept me sober and keep you sober long enough so that you can start to do that. And I can't do that if you don't know.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I said, well, that's the way I'll help.
Yeah. That's amazing. When you look back at your personal experience, was there a singular defining moment where you said, okay, this is it, I got to do this? Or was it sort of like a bunch of little ones?
And I think it was a preponderance of just preponderance of overindulgence, inability to stop.
Yeah.
To stop, consuming alcohol and drugs.
Yeah.
I came to realize that I truly could not drink one drink or do, have one joint or whatever the case may be. It just was not, I could not do it physically. Yeah, I had a good friend of mine for years. He used to say, can't you just have one wine? And I said, yeah, I can have one wine, but I could also have 35 wines, but I choose not
Right.
to.
Yeah.
Because frankly, I tell this people all the time, there's nothing that I've missed or missing for not drinking. There's nothing, right? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. Really enjoying a good red wine,
Sure.
a good bourbon. I have friends who do that with me all the time, and more power to them.
Yeah.
If I could do that, I would. But I'm still with them at dinner, enjoying their company,
Yeah.
or on the golf course, or on a boat, or on the beach, enjoying it just as much as they are. And quite frankly, maybe the following day I enjoy it more.
That's for sure. Well,
Right.
I think that's a really important thing where you haven't altered your entire life and removed yourself from things. You said that I have to deal with this part of it, and people around me, I can't just remove myself and never go to a party or never golf again with guys.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But early on in recovery, you do. We really recommend you change people, places, and things. And then slowly as time goes by and you become more settled in recovery, really more invested in the disease concept, and it's a very key element of your life, then you can reintegrate yourself back into those things. I don't recommend that you get sober, go to rehab, do whatever it is, and then 3 weeks later go to a bar with your friends.
Yeah.
I would say don't. I would say go out for pizza with me.
Yeah.
And let's go bowling or to a movie and play golf. And then maybe in 6 months, a year, when you go to a wedding with your girlfriend, have an exit plan.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
That's huge. That makes a ton of sense. You have to work up to that point.
Yeah. You really do. But
yeah.
It's tough with the youngsters. It's easier as people get older. If we can, God forbid, if we can keep these addicts alive till 28 or 29, because it's so bad now with opiates and perks.
Very true.
And fentanyl, it's so bad. But if we can keep them alive till 28 or 29, and their brain starts to mature, then we have a better chance. It's the youngsters where we really have the.
That's great. That's a great point. Well, the other thing I wanted to talk to you about is, having a business partner. So obviously you have a business partner named Tripway. And how did you meet Trip? How did you guys decide to go into business together? And how's that relationship been?
Yeah, well, listen, so I've always partnered with guys. Been very fortunate. I have a lot of, starts with family. And then a guy named Dave Cantera and Alan. And so I work real well. I like to think we all work real well together.
Sure.
We understand how to divide and conquer and who's better at certain things than others. And Trip came along to do some brokerage for us years ago when I had gotten into a couple office building deals. And that's really not my space. And Trip and his partner at the time in his little leasing team, they came in and we got to know each other, and they were good at what they did, right? And they were good at something I didn't do well and really didn't like that much. I liked the ownership portion of what I was doing, but I didn't like doing the leasing and the leases. So Trip came along and started doing that for me, and did it pretty well. And then and he had a great relationship with some people at his old company, but I guess the time came that he wanted to make some changes.
Sure.
And he came and said, "Hey, look, I'd like to open up a brokerage. Can I use you as, can we partner up? And then I'll handle your leasing on your inventory." At the time we had, between myself and some really closely knit partners, we had 1.5 million square feet of space that we controlled.
Wow.
And so for one guy, and he had one big client at the time, Wisfis, that he was doing all their deals. It was plenty of work for one guy. So he was really going to come in. We'd have a little boutique brokerage company and we'd have a boutique development company. And, we had this office, a building we owned in Newark, and we thought that would be great. And off the road we go. And now here we are 20 agents later and, 10 full-time administrative staff people. And he's, listen, and he handles that and he handles it well.
Yeah.
And he's grown that organically. And so I get involved as much as they need me to. I'm around because it's good for me to source business for them. I love doing that. I love going out and finding opportunities for them. But when it comes to the nuts and bolts, he runs it and he does it really well. And it all came about because he just wanted, I think, a change.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's interesting, having a business partner myself, in a lot of ways, it's like a marriage, right? And I think if you're able in the business world to find someone that likes to do things that you hate, but still works within the context of the industry or the business, that's a home run. I always find it interesting when a lot of times when you're growing up and you're starting your career, people are like, well, you need to get better at the things you're not good at. And that to some extent that's true, but I also find that if you really dislike doing something, you're probably not good at it, and you could probably find someone that's better at it and just partner up with them.
Yeah, and especially when they enjoy doing that part,
exactly,
or don't dislike it as much as you do. So I'm really fortunate, right? I got 4 guys in here that I work with, Trip being one of the main guys, that we all really have kind of a very, I wouldn't say defined, but a very well understood area of expertise and responsibility.
Yeah.
Right. And they know that the reality is that when we get, the devil is in the details of a lease, it's probably not going to be me. It's going to be Trip. But when it comes to financing, it's going to be me, and Trip can help me with financing. He's real good with that now. And when it comes to construction, I may think I know what I know, but I don't. It's going to be Mike. And when it comes to, making sure we get something approved, I may be at the meetings with Newcastle County and Delta, but ultimately my brother Fred's going to get it across the finish line. Yeah. And then our partner John's going to oversee the construction of it all, right, with Mike. So really
organizations have clearly defined roles for people. And I think that's ringing true here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And all of that is just understood. None of it's necessarily, we don't
official.
Have job descriptions.
Right.
Now.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that I'm interested in, your industry in particular was crushed during COVID. And I know there's still effects that are lingering around. Couple of things. How did COVID affect your world, you guys in particular? And then were there any positives that have come out of it?
Well, so to start with, how did it affect it? Listen, there was a lot of sleepless nights. No doubt about it. Just like everybody. I don't think there's an industry that was not touched. And here I am in retail real estate. And with the advent of Amazon and then COVID, we were really concerned. Now, the large share of our tenants are I forget the terminology I used back in the day, but they could remain open.
Okay.
They were essential.
Essential, yeah. Essential employees.
Yeah. So we had convenience, we had food, we had dollar stores, and we had drug stores. Yeah. And then in our office space, half of it's medical, right? Mm-hmm. So we gathered ourselves. We kind of understood what our obligations were. We got together with our lenders. We have a big lending relationship across the entire community. We do business with every bank. Every bank was already out in front of their relationships with their clients. Every client, for the most part, was out in front of that with their tenants. Yeah. And everybody was kind of pulling together in the same direction to say, okay, the bank was saying, okay, here's what we can do. And we were telling the tenants here, okay, here's what we can do for you. And everybody kind of pulled in the same direction. I kind of did. Yeah. And we all got through it. The people that were weak and didn't survive probably in some cases weren't going to anyway.
Good point. Yeah.
The people who did survive became better at what they do.
Yeah.
And more, so not exactly analogous, but somewhat analogous. When we had the bank meltdown of '08, not the savings and loan one before that,
Sure.
but 08, 10, 9. After we came out of that, all of our lenders became far more detail oriented as it related to our portfolio of real estate, our capacity to borrow, to pay back loans, and an understanding of the nature of all of our obligations.
Yeah.
So when we got back into this, we never really stopped. My brother and Fred and I, even then, we kind of took a quick turn and we went to some tenants. We knew we were going to still do deals. And we were doing deals all through that downturn.
Oh, that's great.
Not a lot, but we were doing 2 or 3 deals a year, right?
Yeah.
So, and we were going with tenants that you couldn't borrow money, but we could at the time. Now we were throwing some equity at the deals, but we could borrow money because they were good deals. They were good deals and good tenants. So he and I kind of said, we sat down and said, look, Fred, I'll deal with the fallout. You keep pushing forward on the deals we need. And we did that. And back then it was a very small organization. And so after the fallout of 08, 09, these lenders came back, and one guy in particular, and they helped us better understand how to navigate the borrowing environment and what we needed to present to our lenders to get a level of comfort that we were okay. And what they did for us is make us better at what we do. And they made us better understand our holdings.
Yeah.
And where we were positioned in the marketplace and what our obligations were and what our strengths were, what our weaknesses were, what our maturities were. That made us get better. And that has continued into this day. And I will say that as we come out of COVID taught us a lot of lessons, right? Mm-hmm. And we're learning more about absolute need for some liquidity, absolute need for leaving dry powder with capital with your lenders, as well as liquidity, keeping your leverage level down.
Yes.
Relying on good, strong tenants that are probably not as susceptible to COVID, an pandemic, whatever the case may be. So, and I think a lot of my contemporaries did that. I've seen a lot of guys shift into the flex market, into the industrial market. And I'm going to tell you, Brian, the rents 25 years ago for industrial space was the same as it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It never got any better. It was a very tertiary industry. Those guys kind of built more just to make more. And that market has gone through the roof. And I've seen a lot of guys kind of get nimble and move into it. And we have to a small degree. Certainly from a brokerage perspective, our brokerage company really enjoys strong relationships in those spaces that have been very meaningful for us.
That's great. So that's fascinating that the lessons that you learned in the downturn of 08 really helped you out get through the next downturn.
Yes, absolutely. And staying calm.
Yeah.
And working with everybody. And I believe the entire business community learned from 08.
Yes.
And it got them through COVID.
Yep.
Absolutely. I'm not unique, by the way.
That's
There's still a lot of guys like us and yourself that are still here today because of that.
Very true. Couple more questions. What do you think? Obviously, you're not a prognosticator, but what do you think the commercial real estate market looks like over the next 12 to 24 months?
It's a great question. It's an interesting question, right? I will tell you that I think we have another year of relatively robust activity.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to see things start to, I don't know if normalize is the right word, but I think that you're going to see things start to chill. You're going to have, there'll be fewer deals. There'll be a couple things got to happen, Brian. Number one, cost of funds for years is really what kept the cost of construction from stopping development.
Yep.
If that makes sense. So as prices went through the roof on all our materials, we were still able to get money so cheap we could do deals, and we were still able to push rents.
Yes.
We're going to get to a plateau on all that. So the only thing that's going to be able to change is the cost of construction is going to come down. It's not going to come down until construction slows down, right?
Yep.
Until we solve some of these these international problems. I think we're in for a period of, I don't know if recession is the right word, but we're definitely in for a period of man. Resurrection, not resurrection. Correction. We're into a corrective period.
Yeah.
We're going to have a corrective period. I believe that. And if you're set up properly, if you're not over levered, if you have the right assets, and if you're not depending on and solely on construction and inertia to stay viable, then you should be okay.
Yes.
But it can't continue the way it was last year and the year before. There's no possibility.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point you make about the cost of goods and cost of construction with interest rates being so low that the rates being so low allow you to still kind of take it on the chin that you're paying 400% more for whatever it was for lumber, whatever those numbers end up being. That's really
that was the inverse correlation, the only thing that kept us going. And then guys like me, and I'm only making some assumptions, but I can watch from the sidelines and see it. Look, we have some really good local developers, competitive, mind you, but local.
Yeah.
The crew at Deldon's very good at what they do. The crew at Puccini Pollen's very good at what they do. Petnera is good at what they do. Down in Newark, Lang, Locke, Angela, Sionis, they're all very good at what they do. And I know they all have large portfolios of real estate, some similar to ours, some much larger. And I got to believe they did what we did. When interest rates went down, we took a really close look at what we wanted from that opportunity. So did we want to create some liquidity in assets that were under levered and use that money on new investments? Did we want to create liquidity and put the money away aside? Did we simply want to refinance assets that were lowly levered?
Great point.
And create cash flow? So we took advantage of, our portfolio has 75 or 80 assets in it, right?
Yeah.
At any given time, different properties from single net lease Walgreens to 150,000 foot centers.
Sure.
So we were very aggressive in making sure that we properly financed our assets to meet our future needs.
Yeah.
And took advantage of really low rates with some really good lenders, some really good partners on the banking side. And we don't have a whole lot left. It's not refied for the next 5 to 7 years at
that's
really
fantastic
rates. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really taking advantage of a great opportunity.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So final question. How does one build a firm with so many people that are really good at golf? You have a bunch of low handicappers over there between you and Tripp and Dan Wham and Mr. Bree and the whole crew over there. How's that happen?
Let's start by saying this. There's some really good golfers here. Losner and I are not two of them. We are golfers. We are nowhere near good. I think it's because we're like-minded, right? We all really, I can tell you this about all the people in here. All of the people in here are active. Everybody in here is active. There's nobody in here that isn't doing something outside of this office to keep them busy. And it just so happens a lot of us love golf. And as we brought in interns over the years, these young men that golfed and were contemporaries of our friends, they were golfers, asked to intern here, and we brought them in. And one after the other, after they interned, they came to work for us. Right? And so, listen, I will put our golf team up against anybody. Well, I'll put a foursome up out of here against anybody in the state right now.
If you see the DSM team roll into your charity event, you're going to lose. That's
even
Andy Fox, he's a little bit of a sandbagger, says he's not very good and then hits bombs down the middle every time.
Oh, well, that's at baseball. See,
that's right.
Baseball, right? He's still out. And listen, look at Andy. Andy's a great guy. That guy never stops. He's like the Energizer Bunny. He knows his industry inside and out. He's creative beyond what some of us are. Relationships are great. And then he goes home and coaches baseball or does things with his daughter, whatever the case may be. He does. I know Andy. He doesn't go home and sit down and watch Jeopardy.
No, it is. There has to be some correlation to the level of success versus how active most people are. Because any book you read about CEOs, high-powered CEOs, they're always up early doing some sort of exercise, whether it be golf, tennis, running, whatever. And it's a really fascinating thing to me to see how a lot of really successful people in the business world are super active in their regular lives as well.
Brian, tell me if I'm not right. You need it if you want to keep your sanity, right?
It's funny. I wake up at 4:30 in the morning to go to the gym like 4 days a week, and I do it for my mind more than anything else.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My father used to say everyone has to have a hobby.
Yeah.
And he wasn't lying, right? You have to have something outside of work that allows you those moments of time when you can get away from the office, whether physically or mentally, and from work. And that clarity sometimes gives you your best opportunities to come up with creative ways to solve problems.
Such a great point. A great point. Well, Robert, this is great. I really enjoyed having you on. And thanks so much for your time.
Listen, here's to your seltzer.
Yeah. Well, obviously, this is Polar Seltzer. I think Polar might be the best brand. So cheers to you. We got a Propel there. Perfect.
I got a Propel. I'm a Propel
I'm going to go raspberry lime. Cranberry lime is actually my favorite seltzer flavor, but I'm going to go 4.5 out of 5 stars for that, that Polar. If people want to learn more about you and DSM, where do they go?
So it's dsmre.com. Go on our website. We're here for them for leasing, sales, management, construction. We're here if they need consultation. And we lend that out willingly, freely until we create some value for you. So, call us at the office. Grab one of the guys off a sign. It's not hard to find us.
Your signs are everywhere. That is, I do see that for sure. That's awesome.
Thanks.
Well, if you want to connect with me on the Untapped app so you can learn a little bit more about the beers that I've been drinking during these shows, my username is brcarney7. To learn more about how our firm helps business owners with their financial planning, visit riversedgeadvisors.com. And finally, to hear past episodes of the podcast, go to happy-half-hour.com. Robert, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, brother.
All right, take care.
Thank you for listening to Happy Half Hour with an Entrepreneur, sponsored by Rivers Edge Advisors. For more information on how Rivers Edge Advisors can help you, visit their website at riversedgeadvisors.com. If you'd like to connect with Brian Carney for business advice or just to share a beer, follow him on Instagram at riversedgeadvisors_LLC.